Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz will be sitting down for an interview on CNN tomorrow night. Investors are hoping to learn more about their economic plan, and joining us right now to talk more about that is Bharat Ramamurti, who served as the deputy director of the National Economic Council under President Biden and is an informal economic advisor to the Harris for President campaign. And Bharat, thank you for being here. I'm very glad to have you here today because there's an article on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that lays out what they say is Harris's tax policy, her plan that she'd like to put in place. And it's not very often that we get someone who kind of understands the ins and outs, who can talk us through these things. I realize that in order for some of these things to happen, it would have to mean that Kamala Harris not only won the White House, but you sweep in both houses of Congress. But let's talk through the wish list just so investors can really get their heads around some of these things. Under her plans, taxes on high-income households will go up. We've kind of known that's the plan. Top marginal rates would reach the highest point since 1986. That's 44.6% on all income versus right now you've got 23.8% on capital gains and just over 39% on wages. Why don't we talk about why you think that has to happen and what the ramifications might be?
Sure. Well, a couple points from that article that I think are worth emphasizing. Number one, for people who make under $400,000 a year, which is the vast majority of Americans, their taxes would either stay the same or go down under the Harris plan. In fact, for 100 million Americans, they would get a tax cut under the Harris plan. As for very, very high-income Americans, you're right. There's going to be some tax increases under the plan. They're largely focused on capital income, and I think it's a common sense policy to make sure that we address the problem that we have right now, which is that for people who earn most of their income through a large investment portfolio, over the course of their lifetime, the effective rate that they pay on that is a lot lower than somebody who goes in and teaches school every day or drives a bus or works on the factory floor. I think that that's unfair, and I think most of the American people agree with that. So as we're looking for revenue to bring in, to do this in a fiscally responsible way, it's a source of income, a source of revenue that makes a lot of sense.
Bharat, let's just talk about that. I mean, we can talk about people who have inherited wealth, and that's an entirely different story. But a lot of people who have worked their whole lives have put money into the stock market as a savings plan to make sure that they're saving money over time and allowing that to appreciate. That's money they already paid average wage taxes on. And that then goes into capital gains. Our stock market has done very well because you have capital gains taxes that are lower. It's an incentive for people to invest. If you take that away, what's the potential in terms of what it means for the market?
Again, look, this new rate would apply to a very small sliver of folks. On the capital gains side, you're looking at people who are making over $1 million each year on which this higher rate would apply. And look, I hear the same argument over and over again. You heard it when President Clinton was running, when President Obama was running, when President Biden was running, that these are radical ideas that Democrats are pursuing. But if you just look at the scoreboard over that time period, out of the 51 million jobs that were created during that period, 50 million came under Democratic presidencies. And if you look at the stock market specifically, since you asked about that, the average annual return under Democratic presidencies have been higher than under Republican presidencies. So I really think this idea that Democrats are pursuing radical policies is a myth that's being perpetuated largely by very rich people who like the fact that Republicans will cut their taxes and Democrats won't.
Let me address that very point. Andrew Lotz in this Wall Street Journal story says, and he's an associate director at the Bipartisan Policy Center, says, these would represent sea changes in how we have taxed wealthy individuals and families over the last several decades, and that's not an argument for or against them, but these are sea changes. This is not what we've seen under President Clinton or others, and a big part of that is taxing unrealized gains. Under the Harris plan, capital gains for households making at least $1 million would be taxed at ordinary income. Unrealized capital gains above $5 million per person exclusion would be taxed at death. That tax would have some exemptions for family businesses, but you are talking about taxing unrealized gains at levels that we haven't seen in the past, have never seen before.
Well, I'm glad you brought up unrealized gains because I think it's an important clarification because there's multiple proposals here. Okay. The tax on unrealized gains applies only to people with assets over $100 million. And just to emphasize how small a group that is, that's about less than 1/2 of 1% of Americans, about 60,000 people in the entire country. And yeah, I think it's pretty reasonable given the flawed system that we have right now for capital taxation, that people in that very exclusive category be able to be taxed on unrealized gains. And there's all sorts of exceptions and deferrals within that proposal to make sure that if you're a founder of a company, you don't have to sell your company in order to pay those taxes right away. You can spread it out over an extended period of time, and so on. And again, it comes back to the fact that we have a system where folks in that category are paying much lower rates over the course of their lifetime than people who earn ordinary wage income who are making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. And look, I just think it's important to step back and realize why we're doing this. Over the last 20 years, we have seen an erosion of the tax code. If you go back to where we were in 2000 before the Bush tax cuts, about 20% of GDP was coming in revenue. Thanks to the Bush tax cuts and the Trump tax cuts, we're now closer to 16%. And so fundamentally, what we have right now is a revenue problem. If we went back to the tax code we had in 2000, the national debt would actually be going down. And those tax cuts have largely gone to the very, very rich. So all these policies would do.
First of all, those tax cuts are expiring next year anyway. So it's going to be something
and
that
it's
has
a
to be dealt
spending
with.
problem, Bharat. It's 23% of GDP is being spent. It's usually about 19 or 20%. And it's the long-term average is not 20% of revenues. It's about 18%, and we're at about 17%.
Well, Joe, I just got to disagree on. I got to point something out.
You can't disagree on actual numbers.
No, I got to say that, spending is going up.
What's the long-term spending average? And Harris wants to spend more than what we're spending right now. So what's the long-term percentage of spending to GDP? What do you say it is?
Our spending is going. Everyone knew this back in 2000, that spending would go up on programs like Social Security and Medicare because the baby boomer generation would be retiring. If we had the tax code that we had in 2000. If you look at what's called non-defense discretionary spending, which is spending other than Social Security, Medicare, and other than defense, that is actually historically low right now. So
but overall,
the source
23%.
of our problem, no, because of Social Security and Medicare and so on, and those are anticipated increases because people are retiring. Look, we're about $35 trillion in debt right now. $8 trillion of that, about a quarter of it, came under the Trump presidency. And there was an article actually I saw on your own website, CNBC, last night, saying that the Trump plan would significantly increase the deficit.
Bharat. There's a big difference. There's a big difference with CNBC.com.
But just to get to the point, the Trump plan would significantly increase the deficit a lot more than the Harris plan. So if you're out there and you're concerned about the deficit, it sounds like you guys are. It sounds like a good reason to vote for Harris.